Alright guys, so I just got back from the Slakoth Community Day and I'm about to check every single one of these for their PvP IVs, and I'm going to show you just how long of a process it takes. I'm probably not going to play out the whole thing, I'll probably fast forward through it, but I've only got 40 more minutes before the window to evolve for the Community Day move ends, so I'm just going to get started. Here we go. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do here is actually check all of my shinies. And I want to check my shinies first just because in case I have a good one for PvP, especially a Vigoroth, I'm going to want to evolve one of those first. But one of the things that you'll notice about this video as I go through it is that I shift my focus part of the way through because I realize that the community move is only really for slacking and I could get a good Vigoroth at any time. So part of the way through this, I'll shift away from checking for Great League Vigoroths and then start checking for slackings. But as you can see, I'm checking this first one and just checking the IV combinations. And already this one has 5 combinations right off the bat. So I go through and check these. And so now what I do here is I actually put in G for Great League and the maximum possible IV combination that it could be. Now I'm going to add something to that a little bit later, but again, we go into the check the second one here. And again, you know, I feel like this is a good one to check because it has that really strong HP and it has what looks like could be good PvP IVs, but not impressive, not as good as you'd think. 980 is going to be the best, so I give that a shrug. I put in 980 as the maximum, but then I realize what I also usually do is for all of these PvP IV combinations, and I'm waiting on some lag here, but after this I'm going to put in a 1 out of 3, and that basically signifies what your odds are going to be for actually getting that best combination. So you don't have to re-enter the appraisal again. You can kind of tell just what your odds are going to be of getting that top combination just based on what's in what your Pokemon is named. So again, I'm going to move on to the next one, and I'm going to try to remember to do that for every Pokemon unless it's just really bad overall. And here's one that has a lot of combinations, a lot of potentially good combinations, really high defense, really low attack, 0s, 1s, and 2s across the board. And as you can see, I start putting in some of these combinations. I'm impressed by that one, I guess. That's shooting me all the way up to a 97%. But as you can see, all it takes is one number to be just a little bit off, to be just a little bit different than another number, and it can shoot way up or way down between 200 and 1,000. I'm getting all different kinds of results here, and this is the kind of thing where I really start to lose my patience for stuff like this, especially when and not in terms of like getting frustrated with it, but just in terms of wanting to check this particular Pokemon. Because keep in mind, I came home from Community Day, and most people will be wanting to maximize their time and play on Community Day for as long as they possibly can. And that time you have left over that Niantic has added, that extra hour to evolve all your Pokemon and get those Community Day moves, has become invaluable, especially for PvP IVs. As you can see, I'm still checking this guy. I'm still going on this rant, and I was kind of trying to find what the range was, like what the best ones are, and here I'm actually highlighting these to kind of roughly count how many there are. So I found about 2 good combinations in like the top 200. I'm just gonna average 280 as the top and maybe 1 out of 7 because there's about 13 or 14 combinations there, and there's 2 of them that will be good. So that's why I picked 1 out of 7. And that guy, I noticed that he had bad attack, so I'm gonna check him just out of posterity, but I really don't think he's going to be good. And as you can see right away, there's really not much that this guy has. Probably the best combination is 2,700. I'm going to try a couple other ones here just to see. Yeah, yep. But you never know. With PvP IVs, there might be that diamond in the rough, but I just label this one as not good because all of these are going to have higher attack than its other stats. So I'm not even going to bother to check that particular Slakoth any further for any of the leagues, for any of its evolutions. Again, this is another one I wanted to check because it had that pretty decent defense, and thankfully it only has one IV combination. We can actually label this guy, and that's exactly what we're going to do as a matter of fact. This is where we change over from checking for Vigoroths to Slackings, because I had this idea that, well, maybe I should be evolving those instead. And I don't know if slacking with its Community Day move is ever going to be good. I don't know if abilities will ever be a thing. I don't know if Yawn will ever change. We're having the rumored fairy type fast move that it's just going to inflict basically a debuff or a status effect. And maybe Yawn could go the same way. So I'm really not interested in checking that one, so for the sake of time, I'm just going to label it with the exact IV combination and move on. This one only has 2 combinations, again, a little bit easier than some of the other Slakoths we've dealt with. But one thing I didn't know when I was first checking for Slackings was the levels that they need to be at in order to fit into the various leagues. You need one that's an incredibly low level. I think it's like level 12.5 in order to fit into the Great League in most situations, and then a Ultra League Slacking would be in like the level 20 range, maybe not even level 20 range, less than that. So I find another one that's not good here, and I'm getting to the point where I'm actually going to find a pretty decent one fairly soon. But as you can see, it's getting harder and harder for me to fill in this video with commentary, just because I've kind of gotten through most of the ideas that I wanted to get to, and there's a combination that you think would be fairly good. One with a 14 in defense and a 15 in attack, and I'm going to check this guy. And as you can see, not impressive. Still only like 2,200. Now, one thing I don't realize here is that I'm making the mistake of leaving the Vigoroth on Ultra League, which is not something I'm really looking for. I'm not really looking for an Ultra League Vigoroth at the moment. I'll figure all that out later. But that's one of the things that can happen when you're checking IVs as well, is that if you don't have all of your settings correct, if you have a misplaced number, if you misread something, if you mischeck one of your IV calculations, or you misread the IV's readouts or anything like that, then that can all make a huge difference in what rankings you're going to see for your Pokemon. So I don't know when exactly I'll realize that I made the mistake, but I think I switched back to Great League Vigoroth, and here I think finally I checked the one that I end up keeping. I check both of the IV. No, this isn't it. This isn't it. This is still one of the worst ones. And as you can see, what do you do with this? I mean, a Pokemon like this, this one's actually pretty high level. I think this one, if I can get past the screen here, is about 4,500 to power up, or somewhere close to that. And if I would try to refine it with a power-up, that would be very expensive, right? So there's a technique that I'll talk about later on in the video when I can see myself doing an example of it, of a faux power-up or a fake power-up. And here I finally find one that's good. It's got a 1, very low attack, very high defense, good HP IVs, and as a Great League Vigoroth, this is going to be either a 450 or a 415, and now I'm thinking about this, and I'm looking at all of my shinies that I have, and I'm thinking, well, what do I want to do here? Do I want to power them up? I mean, do I really want to even check for Vigoroths at this point because it's not getting the Community Day move? Do I want to check for that later? Do I want to take the risk and evolve one that has a very, very low chance of having them better PvP IVs, I probably could since it's only 25 candy. I might take the risk and just do that later on. But as you can see, like if you're running out of time, if you're running out of candy, then trying to decide between a Pokemon like this that has a ranking of like possibly 450 or 414 and trying to decide between one that has a 1 out of 7 chance of being, say, 280 in this case, then which one do you do? Like, which one do you spend your candy on? That's something that you have to, you know, ask yourself when you're doing all of these appraisals. So now at this point, we finally, after I don't know how many minutes of this, at least 10 minutes possibly, are finally checking our regular Slakoths. We've checked most of our shinies, and we've kind of determined which ones are going to be good Vigoroths. And again, this is just more work, this is just more grinding out numbers, checking them IV combinations one at a time, just to see how they rank. And you end up finding a lot of stinkers. And this finally is where I'm going to switch over to slacking. This is where I'm going to try to figure out which of my Slakoths will work the best for the various leagues. And I skipped down to checking this 321 CP Slakoth here because at this point I realized that in order to have a great league slacking, it needs to be fairly low level. And this one, even as low of a CP as it is, still isn't going to make it into the Great League. It's one level too powerful, but it was extremely close. So what I'm saying is when you're doing this, don't waste your time checking Pokemon for IVs that are going to be out of the range of the league. You're going to want to go to the PvP IV checker, and it doesn't matter what combination you enter. You can enter just about any combination and it'll give you basically your average level for what a Pokemon should be at when you look at the top 10 that's ranked on the screen there. Or in this case, only a top 8. I think I cropped it off a little too far to see the whole top 10. Now the thing about checking these Slakoths, the lower the level you get, the more IV combinations generally you are going to have. Unless you have any perfect stats or any stats that are tied for being perfect, then chances are you're probably going to get a good high number of readouts. This one I'm not going to get too many readouts for because it's got 2 equal stats. So that really narrows down the possible IV combinations when the calculator is looking at all of the available combinations and what the IVs could be. And that previous example was a good example of a Pokemon that just because it's too high a stats or defense and HP doesn't necessarily mean it's really good. You really need that low attack stat. And shocker, we actually have a Slakoth that has a guaranteed 0 in attack and a guaranteed 15 in HP. Now, those rankings are going to differ just only a little bit based on the HP, but at this point I know I've got another one that's pretty much a shoo-in that it's going to be a good slacking for Great League if I choose to evolve it, no matter what those combinations come out to be. So at this point, I think this is the one that I'm going to keep as my Great League slacking. I don't know it yet at the time, but that's something that I will decide later on. And again, I'm continuing to check more IVs here for more of these really low-level Slakoths, and as you can see, this guy has an absolute ton of combinations. And look at this. Look at the difference right here between one number. That's a 227 potentially, or a 237 potentially. It could be either of those combinations along with hundreds of others. Well, maybe not hundreds, but at least, 10 or 12 other combinations. And you can see just how much that single number affects that. In fact, I'm going to go back and look at it again here. 227 gets up to the greens. It gets up to a 97%, but when you add that 3, and that is why PvP IVs are so tricky, because you know, you can have a number that's just 1 point off, and you can see the difference between a number 1 ranked and one that's, you know, basically in the abysmal range. And again, I discover another one right here, the difference between the 31113 and the 31213. One of them is a 28, and the other is a 2,713. Something that you would look at and you would think, wow, that would be a great PvP-IV combination. Just isn't. And at this point, it's starting to drive me insane. You could see me laughing up there. I'm actually starting to break down and go mad with laughter from just the absolute ridiculousness. I'm going to actually try a full power-up here. Which is to go to your power-up window, see what the CP is going to be after powering up, and try to guess what the HP is going to be after powering up. And I'm actually not having too much success doing that here, but you need to be able to know. As you can see, I tried powering it up. I must not have guessed the HP correctly or the amount of Stardust, and every time you do a full power-up like this, you have to reset it. You have to reset your IV calculator. Now, if you have IV Calci, it will do some of these things for you, but just my policy is to not have any other apps installed that have anything to do with Pokemon Go. And as you can see, when we get down to this other Slakoth here, this is just getting into absolutely abysmal territory. Just unbelievably... I mean, not abysmal in terms of the IV combinations being bad necessarily, but just how many you have to check being a level 1. It's just uncanny. And you don't want to be spending Stardust to power these guys up, because if you are into PvP, then you know how important that Stardust is going to be when you're considering your teams and everything you're going to need to be building for. It's easy to get carried away powering up a Pokemon multiple times, and I've done it so many times and wasted so much Stardust just trying to find out what something was. So at this point, I'm actually going up to some of my other Slakoths, and keep in mind, I still have not IV checked all of these guys yet, but I'm trying to use my brain, and I'm trying to eliminate some of the potential Slakoths that I'm not going to be needing, because certain Slakoths are going to be too high of a level to fit into certain leagues. And at this point, I'm just IV checking a few just to see what their levels are, and just to see what the difference is, and, you know, if they're too powerful for certain leagues. As you can see, I have Slacking with Ultra League selected, and it takes about level 21, 20 and a half to get up there. So, a lot of... But I don't really have too many Slakoths in my collection that are too high of a level, so I still have to end up checking a lot of these. And I found one with equal defense and HP. One which actually turned out to be fairly decent for the Ultra League. So I think I found my Ultra League Slakoth at that point. Again, I didn't know that I had found it, but that's what I ended up finding, and I ended up deciding to evolve that later on. And oddly enough, the Slakoth that I was saving for the potential community day, which it did eventually get, the 14, 13, 12 that I have labeled there, is actually tied for first place with the highest IVs that I caught all day. So it ended up being something that I did evolve. So I'm glad I ended up saving it instead of throwing it out so long ago. But now this is where I'm really trying to make the decisions. I'm really trying to decide which ones I'm going to evolve, how much candy I have, which ones are even eligible to evolve for certain leagues. And I'm also realizing something else at this point, is that all of my Slackings that I have selected, one for the Great League, one for the Ultra League, and one for the Master League, are all not shiny. And I would like to have at least one shiny with the special move. Thankfully, I did catch enough Slakoths throughout the day to evolve 4 of them all the way up, and still have some candy left over. But at this point, I'm just trying to make some decisions here. and at this point my time is really running out. As you can see, I don't have the top bar on my screen, but it's getting down to the last like 10 or so minutes. And at this point I'm really stumped as to which shinies could be the best, because you know I've got a lot of shinies that have a lot of potential IV combinations. When I checked those IV combinations, I was only checking for Great League Vigoroth. I wasn't checking for Slackings in other areas. So at this point I'm running out of time, and I would basically have to go back and recheck all of my shinies against the Slackings in the various leagues to see how they stack up. And as you probably can guess, that's not really a prospect I'm excited about. And I call for backup. I call for cat backup because I need some help here. She's gonna try to give me some help, and actually she's more interested in wanting to build me a raid team at the moment. So I don't think she was up for the whole being on camera or helping me out, checking my PvP IVs, but she gave a good attempt. So let's give a round of applause, you know, for my cat. She tried. She genuinely tried. Now I'm figuring here, since I have a good slacking selected for each league at this point, I'm probably just going to want to evolve my strongest shiny, because my strongest shiny did happen to be a one of the strongest percentages IV-wise in terms of all my slackings, and it's something that I could drop into a gym just to be annoying. So I decide later on to evolve all of my league slackings and then evolve my highest level shiny. So I begin that here, and I think I'm going to fast forward through it at this point, because this is the point where I start making decisions rather on what I want to keep and what I don't. And I do get sidetracked, like checking the IVs as I evolve these guys, just to kind of see, you know, where they sit and what IVs they're going to be, just because of my curiosity. I really didn't need to do this. I could have just evolved them straight up, because at that point I had made my choices. But it's those kind of things, all those little checks are all going to detract from your time when you're needing to do this. So now we finally get to the point where we decide that we're going to evolve my strongest shiny slacking or Slakoth into a slacking, and I think the Vigoroth looks pretty cool. He's got more of an orange tint. He's definitely got more of an orange hair thing. I don't know if you call that a coif. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm definitely a fan of orange, so I definitely like the shiny Vigoroth, even though I think Slakoth is my favorite by far. And my favorite thing about slacking is probably the red nose. But I think we're finally getting into territory where we're wrapping it up, and as you can see by our timer, yeah, this took me a long time, and I didn't even really bother to check, and I decided to evolve my slacking, or my Vigoroth at the very end here, that I plan to use for Great League, and that's it. And that's it. And that's it. We're done. I'm going to try to explain everything that I did in a commentary later on, and you'll probably have just heard that anyways in the video, so why am I even saying so? Yeah, but wow, that was exhausting. Alright, so you guys are probably wondering why I just showed you that big thing there I just did with all my IVs. Well, the whole idea of having to check IVs in the first place is really starting to kind of wear on me, and I'm also the kind of person, keep in mind, that I'm always looking out for the future. I'm always looking out for the future of this game, and I'm always looking at ideas of how things could be better and how things could be improved. And I'm not the kind of person that likes to just sit there and just accept things the way they are. So I started to ask the question to myself, why can't we see our IVs? Because while it is true that there were a lot of Pokemon games for a lot of generations where you couldn't exactly see your exact IVs, a lot of the newer games do have the ability to view your stats and your other IVs and everything else of that nature. And when you take a look at graphs like this one over here, and you take a look at how many different IV combinations there can be for any Pokemon, I mean, this is, granted this is a level 5, so there's going to be a lot of IV combinations that pop up, but can you just imagine how much time it would save everybody? Not only people who are in the PvP, but also just collectors and people who like to get high IVs and low IVs, people who like to collect all 15s and all zeros, and people who like to get specific IV combinations. Wouldn't it be so much nicer if you could just see them? Like if you could just take a look at one of your Pokemon on the screen and right below the HP, there's the IVs without having to use an IV calculator or anything. Think of how much time that would save. Think of how much time it would save people who are in the PvP. Now granted, you still have to run a lot of these calculations through an IV calculator like the PvP IV spread analysis. So, and you know, perfect IVs aren't always going to be good for PvP. In fact, very rarely are they. But you know, even if you're not in the PvP, just being able to see the right combination the first time and not having to check dozens and dozens of combinations, you know, to see which one it could be, and just being able to know without having to spend all the Stardust and just being able to look. Think of how much, on top of time, think of how much Stardust that would save PvP players. It would be something that would benefit everybody. And the thing is, I started to ask myself this question of why we can't see our IVs in general, and I'm really not coming up with a good answer. Like, anybody who's watching the comments for this video, put something down in the comments right now why you think Niantic does not let us see our IVs. Because look at the video I just did here. I mean, I had to sit here for nearly 40 minutes and check my IVs, and I still didn't go deep into which ones were really the best. There were some that had combinations that I couldn't check because I didn't want to spend the Stardust to level them up, because I need that Stardust if I want to compete in the next PvP tournaments. And all that time I spent checking IVs and looking into all of these and comparing every single stat against the spreadsheet is all time that I could be spending being out there throwing Pokeballs and catching Pokemon and possibly having to go and restock Pokeballs. So I would have to get out there and do more walking and get to more Pokestops. And if I was doing way too much catching and I wasn't able to visit Pokestops, well, I might have to buy more Pokeballs with real money. And so when it comes to the fact that, you know, all of this just detracts from being able to see, because think about this, like for all this time, like the only thing we've been able to do is, like, you just watch anybody who plays Pokemon Go on YouTube. You just watch anybody who plays in general. The first thing they do when they catch something is they immediately go to check the IVs. They have to look at what the appraisal is, and then a lot of times if it's not a perfect, or if it doesn't have some kind of, well, if it's not even a 0%, you can't really tell. If it's not a perfect, you don't really know what it is. So that's all time that's spent taken away from being able to play the game. So you would think that giving players more time to catch Pokemon and less time to sit here in front of an IV calculator checking IVs, you would think that would equal more money for my Niantic. So I'm not just looking out for the players, but I'm also looking out for Niantic as well. And on top of that, I'm really trying to think of what the real downside would be. What the real, like, non-benefit of just having your IVs there just to be able to see them would be. I mean, people would be able to see the IVs in the screenshots anyway, and maybe people don't want to show off certain Pokemon if they're not really good IVs, but just like we have for the moves, why couldn't we make it a separate tab, you know? I mean, instead of being able to see, you know, your weight and your height and other kind of useless information, have a tab there that allows you to switch between the view that you currently have and your IV view. What would be the big problem? And then people could take screenshots of their Pokemon and they could choose whether or not they wanted to show people them IVs or whether they wanted to keep them hidden. Plain and simple. I'm really, really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, and the only other reason I can think of is maybe because Niantic realizes that according to the CP calculations, low attack Pokemon really aren't good, and it's kind of tricky to explain to new players that Pokemon with a high attack are bad when it comes to fighting. It's kind of an interesting dynamic with the way the CP calculation works out. But maybe, you know, that's just a quirk of it. You know, a lot of people don't do PvP IVs. You know, a lot of people choose to rock with Pokemon that are low PvP IVs anyway. A lot of people choose to rock with Pokemon that are low PvP IVs anyway, so for a lot of people this won't matter, but I really think that if we want to take Pokemon Go to a more esports level, which is what I've heard a lot of people talking about, and I really think that there's a whole lot more to be said on this situation. I think that deserves its a whole nother video all by itself. But I'll save that for the future. But I'm always looking at these things about the game. I'm always looking at what are the little things that are holding it back. What are the things that we might not have thought of as players that we could do to help improve the game. Because as it is, we have the Sylph Road, which really, really helps bring the community together, and if it wasn't for the Sylph Road Cups, we wouldn't really even have a competitive community at this point. So, on top of that, you know, and on top of that, I hear a really defeatist attitude from a lot of players. I brought this up in Discords, and I brought this up to my community. I've brought this up to other players. I brought this up to random strangers. And it seems like the first immediate approach is for a lot of people to just go, well, that's how it'll be. Niantic will never fix that. They don't care. That's how it is. And a lot of people accuse Niantic of being what's called a tech bro company, which is kind of this thing where it's sort of like they don't listen to player feedback as much, and they sort of have their own vision. And it's kind of like if the players suggest something, then it might not be within their vision, and they might think, you don't really know what you want. You know, we know what you want. We know what will keep bringing you back to the game. So a lot of people, I think, they get this idea that, you know, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing people can say to Niantic. But if you look at the outrage that was caused with the whole Mewtwo EX raid passes, you guys remember that? I mean, they boosted the rate of them, and that's all we were really asking, is to just put out more raid passes per raid, and that's what they did. We complained, and they responded. You know, we begged for PvP, and they responded. We begged for trading, and they responded. We begged for more generations of Pokemon, and they responded. So why does the player base think that there's no chance that we could ever see IVs just plain old displayed in the profile for each of our Pokemon? Why is that such a far-fetched idea? And I know that maybe I'm getting a bit too overly passionate about this, and by all means, you guys, feel free to comment below with any of your ideas on why this is or isn't possible, or why I'm, you know, just complaining or whatever, you know, or why you agree with me or don't. Feel free to post your comments But again, I see the whole idea of revealing people's IVs to them in the stats screen in at least some sort of tabbed format as something that would generally help everybody. And I think it's something that if we asked for enough, we could get it as a community. Because imagine in a game like League of Legends, imagine going back to buy your weapons at the shop, and it didn't tell you your attack percentages. It didn't tell you your extra bonuses. It didn't tell you your type effectivenesses. It didn't tell you your critical hit chance. It didn't tell you your anything. Imagine you go back to buy those weapons from the shop, and it says, this weapon looks really strong. Impressive. Or imagine you go back to buy it and it says, the stats look kind of basic. You know, when people want to get hardcore about a game, they really want to be able to examine all of the mechanics. And I think that just being able to put your stats out there is going to help a lot of players not only be able to cycle through their bag, help burn up Pokeballs faster, help make Niantic more money, but it will make them more competitive. It will help them feel confident in their team, and it will help them make better choices when it comes to their lineup, which is all going to help them feel better when it comes to them actually competing in a big PvP tournament. And when you're trying to draw new players into a game who might not be interested, that is the kind of feeling you want. That feeling that you aren't the best player right now, and you know it, but if you tried real hard, you could be. And just having access to the tools that you need gives players the confidence. And just ask anybody who's into PvP how essential that PvP IV spread analysis has become, and how badly the community was jonesing for more PvP IV spread analysis websites when the original one went down for a few days. So I think that's the end of my rant here. I think there's nothing more I can say. I hope I've inspired you guys. Again, I'm not mad at anybody, Niantic, or the community. It's just something where we haven't demanded any better. For years, we've never really had a reason to really have a close look at our IVs because, you know, we understand what the appraisals mean. We understand when we get perfect stats. We understand when we get high IVs. But now we're in a different ballgame. We don't want to have perfect IVs. We want to have different combinations. And in order to help PvP become more of an esport and become more competitive, I think that's one of the things that really needs to happen in order for players to feel better and to be more competitive overall. So that's it, guys. That's the end of this rant. That's the end of this video, finally, right? Now, what originally inspired this, I was originally going to do this back on Torchic Community Day, but my original rant got a little derailed at the very, very beginning because something really, really, really cool happened on the Torchic Community Day, and I'm going to end this video with a clip from that. Take a look. Oh, and I'll see you in the next one. I was just playing, and on Community Day, I just got back in, and it has been raining. It has been drizzling all day, and it was very, very difficult to play outside. Your phone would just get wet. It would just get soaked constantly. So why don't I just start doing this? Why don't I just show you guys how I do this? So let's just start with the first one, Torchic. 53, 800. Oh. And it's very important when you're doing this that you have snacks and you have a comfortable place to sit. This one looks like it has great HP and defense. Perfect as a matter. Whoa. Whoa. This is literally the first one I checked. Now, this could be really bizarre because, like, I don't know if you guys know this, but, like, when it comes to PvP, 0-15-15 isn't always perfect. It isn't always great.
What? Did... Holy crap! Oh my god! It's a number 1 ranked. Number 1. Oh my god! I was gonna sit down. Okay, so this said really strong, right? This said really strong. And you never quite know if that first stat is going to be like a 0 or a 1 or a 6 or a 7. It can be any one of those combinations. Are you kidding me? I was just about to sit down and check all of these Torchics. Every single one. Holy cow. Do I even need to go any further? It's a number 1. What? Your kid... That was like the last one I caught of the whole day. Well... Oh my god. Do I even continue with the video after this? Do I even continue with what I was going to do? Okay.